What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. You asked for it, so today I'm bringing to you the competitive $30 Soulburner deck profile. Now, this is going under the assumption you could only buy 3 of the Soulburner Structure Decks, and that's all you have to work with, although there would be some nice upgrades if you up the budget a little bit, to get copies of, say, Lady Debug, or all the rare cards, like the Chimera Fusion, the Fusion of Fire, as well as, some of the other Link monsters from the newest set. But this is for the super budget player, because I wanted to give you guys just something you can work with and mess around with maybe at locals that's actually really solid because of all the tools that they included in this structure deck. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So kicking things off, we're going to start off with 3 copies of Salamangreat Gazelle. This is basically the card you're always going to want to see. It's basically your main starter by just sending cards to your graveyard, most notably something like Spinny, which we'll get to here in a moment. But then also, if a Salamangreat monster is sent to the graveyard, you can special summon it, which will then trigger its other effect because you don't have to do either effect. You can use both effects once per turn. Just an incredible card. You're always going to want to see this card. You're always going to usually get this back at the end of your combos as well. Just a fantastic way to start off the deck profile. Then we have 3 copies of Salamangreat Spinny. This is probably like the second best card in terms of your main monster lineup, simply because you're able to just get it back from the graveyard as long as you have a Salamangreat monster, which means if you have something like, say a Gazelle, you can just bring it out, immediately go into something like your Mirage Stalio, and then you're going to be looking pretty solid for a lot of your combos. It also helps you link climb if you can't go into, say, a rank 3 play, but that's perfectly okay. Spinny is an incredible card. Next up, we have 3 copies of Salamangreat Foxy. Foxy's really cool because it's basically like your Area 0 in a normal summon. So if you normal summon it, you activate the top 3 cards of your deck, and basically if you have a Salamangreat card amongst them, you're able to add that card to your hand. So what's cool about Foxy is that it's a true +1 in your deck, whereas something like, say the Gazelle isn't necessarily, even though it's a very good combo starter, this card is truly a +1, and at the cost of your normal summon, it's fine. But if you have something like Spinny already in the graveyard, this is a really good turn 2 play, because then you can just bring back Spinny, go into Mirage Stalio, go off from there, and you got some extra value off of that. So Foxy is incredible. It also has the ability to pop back row as well, which could potentially come up depending on the specific matchup you may encounter. Moving on to 2-ofs though, I've got 2 copies of Jack Jaguar. Now, Jack Jaguar is good for what it is. I mean, it's a nice 1800. It's level 4, which is a little bit unfortunate, but it inflicts piercing, which is nice. And the other thing is that it's able to special summon itself back from the grave, very similar to something like how Spinny can. So again, even though it doesn't enable your Mirage Stalio plays, it allows you to link climb. And so not only does it give you a nice beater, it's a nice card to send to the graveyard if you're able to recover it back onto the field. So just a nice card. I figured 2 of is enough. Then we have 2 copies of Salamangreat Falco. Falco, again, is okay for what it is. Since we are only working with the confines of what's in the deck, we do have to have a little bit of filler, but I figured having more Salamangreat cards is good, because if we can get into stuff like our Bale Links and things like that, that's basically being able to enable that to get us to our Sanctuary, kind of just gets the rest of our engine going if we don't see something like Gazelle. So Falco, again, it's okay for what it is. Allows you to reset your trap cards that are in the graveyard, which is very beneficial without having to burn the effect of the trap card itself, giving you some more added flexibility in that regard. And again, it's just able to do some pretty cool things. Then we have 2 copies of Salamangreat Foul. This is another one that's again, it's okay. It's 1800 for, so for a baseline attack power on a level 4, it's pretty good. But then you're also able to special summon, if you normal or special, another Salamangreat card. So again, link climbing is important, allows you to get to some of your further plays, and just allows you to build a little bit of more a formidable board. Also, because some of the Salamangreat trap cards specifically want us to have monsters on the field, using the Foul is good, because then not only does it allow you to link climb for stuff like the Icarus attack trap card, but you just want to make sure you have those cards available to make sure all of your powerful cards are online. Now for the 1-ofs, we have 1 copy of Salamangreat Mole. This card is, again, okay. You can just special summon out to a link zone that a Salamangreat monster is pointing to, but most importantly, if it's in the graveyard, you can shuffle 5 of your Salamangreat cards back into your deck and draw 2, so it's a little pot of avarice. I don't think playing more than 1 is necessary, but it's kind of nice if the game does run long. You could send it off Gazelle, which is pretty cool. So just a nice 1-of. Again, it's probably not like anything more than that. one copy of Salamangreat Foxer. Foxer is not as good as Foxy by any means, but I wanted to play the Foxer because it is a level 3, so it does have that synergy for going into Mirage Stallion. Again, another viable target to send off Gazelle if you don't want to send Spinny. It's an okay card for what it is. If you already have Spinny and Grave, Foxer can be fine. Its effect isn't like too relevant, but it's like okay, so I think it's just fine as a one of. So that wraps up our Salamangreat monster lineup. Moving on though, we have 3 copies of the highly in-demand Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Of course, you're going to be running this. It's like one of the best hand traps, if not the best hand trap ever printed. It's not like the best hand trap at the moment in the current metagame at the time of recording this video, but against so many other decks with such a wide diversity and pretty much just with the range of cards this card can hit, you're going to play this, right? I mean, obviously, since it's been pretty much, it's just been in demand for so long, you're going to play this in this deck. I'm also going with 3 copies of Dogoron, the Mad Flame Kaiju. Now, this is actually pretty neat because even if you open 2 copies of Dogoron, you can give your opponent one of them, special one of your own, and then if you have something like Gazelle to get into something like your Mirage Stallion, you can use Mirage Stallion's other effect when it gets linked off to go ahead and bounce the Dogoron you gave to your opponent back to your hand. So that's actually pretty neat, and just giving the extra damage output for this deck, since we don't have access to stuff like the Chimera because of Fusion of Fire not being in the structure deck, it just gives you a lot higher damage output. And for the specific metagame we're currently encountering with Thunder Dragon being everywhere as well as Sky Striker, this card's amazing at getting rid of a Colossus. You can actually search, which is one of the big weaknesses of this deck, and also giving it to your Sky Striker opponent, so that way it shuts off all their Widow Anchors and you're free to do all your plays. I definitely think playing this out of 3 of is a really solid idea. And rounding out the monsters, I have 1 True King Agnimazod the Vanisher. This is only in here because A, it's a gigantic beater, and B, it's non-targeting banish removal for monsters, so it's just kind of like this very niche card that if you have like a really annoying card you're trying to get off the board, you can just nuke some of your monsters, summon this, and the cards actually do stuff in the graveyard, like you want to get Spinny in the graveyard and things like that. So it's not the worst card. I figured as a one of, it's just nice, decent removal on top of a gigantic body. So that's going to be it for the monsters, a pretty heavy monster heavy lineup for this deck. Moving on to spells though, 3 copies of Salamangreat Circle. Of course you're going to run 3 of this because it is your reinforcement of the army for the archetype. You got so many targets in this deck too to choose from, and I kind of wanted to have a little bit of variety just so you can pretty much get to what you need in any specific instance. It's a quick play spell. It also protects your linked monsters, which is nice. Then we have 3 copies of Will of the Salamangreat. Now, in a traditional build, you're probably not going to run 3 of this, but for this purpose, holy shit, this card is incredible because basically this is like your extender of the deck because it allows you to special summon a Salamangreat monster from your hand or graveyard for free. Like, there's really no downside to it, and since it's continuous, you're able to do that once per turn. Not to mention, if you have a Link monster, this card gets even more explosive. I feel like you're always going to want to see this card because if your opponent does disrupt you in any way, this card is going to allow you to keep pushing, and I think that's highly, highly underrated for a structure deck like this. So I definitely think maxing out on Will of the Salamangreat for the purposes of this specific video is a very good idea. Wrapping up the spells though, 2 copies of Salamangreat Sanctuary. I know traditional builds only run 1, but just because the ceiling of our deck goes so much higher if we can keep this card on the field, and I know Valix can search it, so that's perfectly fine. I just want to make sure we had multiple copies to search in case something were to happen to the first one, so that way, you know, we're pretty much all set to go and can do a lot more of our explosive plays. That's going to wrap it up for the spells though. Moving on to the traps, we have 3 copies of Salamangreat Roar. This is your Infernity Barrier. I mean, you're going to want to play this just because it can pretty much negate anything, and the fact that it can reset itself, it's just so good. There's really no reason you don't want to play this. Then we've got 2 copies of Salamangreat Rage. I don't want to go too heavy on this because it is a -1 for the first effect, but if you get a Link monster out onto the board, you're going to be able to do some really crazy plays with it because it's going to be like a 1 for 3 with a Heat Leo. We don't have, again, access to some of the other cards like Sunlight Wolf, which makes this card a little bit more accessible in terms of getting extra value, but it is good removal, and sometimes structure decks lack good removal, so I figured it was okay at 2. And then lastly, 3 copies of Goes and Match. I'm so happy they put this in here because our entire deck is fire. We can play completely under this card, and again, this card really messes up Sky Striker. It can mess up Altergeist pretty bad. Thunder Dragon can play under it just depending on their board, but if you hit them at the right time, it can actually be pretty devastating. So Goes and Match is essential just for allowing us to keep control of the board. It acts as pseudo removal and just a wonderful inclusion in this $30 deck. Going on to the extra deck though, we don't really have too many options. We pretty much just have to use what they gave us. 3 copies of Salamangreat Mirage Stalio. This is pretty much your ultimate play starter if you can get into it with 2 level 3s, but if you do, you should be in very good shape, and so playing 3 just because we don't really have too many other options is absolutely essential. 3 copies of the Salamangreat Bale Links. Again, pretty much just requires 1 level 4 lower Cyberse monster, which most of the cards in our deck are, so you're gonna be able to do this, get to your Sanctuary, and you're going to be in pretty good shape. Not to mention the protection effect is highly just crucial in a lot of different circumstances, so you're going to want to have as many copies of this as you can. And then we have 3 copies of Salamangreat Heatleo. This is kind of like the biggest beater we're going to get in this deck for a Link monster in the extra deck, and it's pretty good. It's got some pretty nice effects. You're going to be wanting to try to go into this as much as you can with the Salamangreat Sanctuary card, just so you can trigger the effects of your traps to reset them and have a pretty good established turn 1 board. We also got 3 copies of Flame Administrator. Again, just because we have to play it, it's okay. It's going to buff our guys if we ever get to the point where we can just start spamming the board with Link monsters. And then lastly, 3 copies of Duelist Chimera. This card's actually highly underrated in this deck because not only does it give us Link arrows and buffs all our guys by 500 attack, but also if it just gets destroyed or leaves the field, you get to add a fire card from your graveyard to your hand. So that means you can get like a Gazelle. You can get literally anything in the deck back to your hand to help set up for your next play. So that's just having that built-in recursion is really good for a deck like this, and that just kind of helps wrap everything up all together in one nice little package. So guys, that's gonna do it for the $30 competitive Soulburner Salamangreat deck. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about this deck, and if this is something you'd want to try out at your locals. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. But don't worry, next week we're gonna be doing a bunch of Salamangreat related content. We'll also bring you a deck profile that's more of the competitive, level, just not really worrying too much about the budget. So I really hope you guys stay tuned for that. So guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video informative, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member, because just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.